Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. This thing has been functioning for hundreds of years. Since before the beginning of modern times.
Yeah, but this is different from the kind of time you were talking about before. Sunrise to sunset, Sabbath to Sabbath, isn't it? This is mechanical time, isn't it?
You bet. You bet it is. You bet. I sometimes think that this clock, this machine, is what constitutes humanity's first real break from the world of nature. Wouldn't you say so? Hello?
The clock did much more than that. It became the model of the cosmos. And then they mistook the model for the real thing. People got the idea that nature was just a giant clock, not a living organism, but a machine.
That's exactly what I've been trying to tell this lunkhead. Exactly, word for word. Maybe you recognize him. Jack Edwards? And you're?
Sonia Hoffman. I think I've heard your name somewhere.
Yeah, maybe in a couple of hundred news broadcasts. He was a candidate for the U.S. presidency in the primaries.
Oh, I vaguely remember. See, I'm not a voter.
Most Americans don't vote either.
I do know who you are.
Me? You know who I am? I doubt it.
You're Thomas Harriman, the poet.
Well, yes, I am, but wait a minute. Let me get this straight. You recognize me, a poet whose latest work sold all of 12,000 copies, but you do not recognize this gentleman who was a presidential candidate in America? My God, woman, what's happened to your values? What do you do?
I'm a scientist, and we do occasionally read poetry. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a lot of it these days. I'm on a sort of sabbatical. I'm an ex-physicist, an ex-American resident, an ex-voter.
Ex-wife?
This is very upsetting. Why don't intelligent people like yourself bother to vote?
Well, forgive me, you politicians make it so hard. The ideas expressed by most of you, right and left, seem to me as antique and mechanical as that old clock.
What's that supposed to mean?
Well, if I was to explain that, I'd have to go all the way back to Descartes, if you remember him.
Yeah?
To be or not to be?
I think, therefore I am.
Yeah, well, we both went to college, yeah.
Well, Descartes was the primary architect of the view that sees the world as a clock. A mechanistic view that still dominates most of the world today, and it seems to me, especially you politicians.
Mechanistic. Is that a real word?
Mechanistic? Mechanical? Mechanics? Yeah, it's a good word.
Mechanistic, as if nature functioned like a clock. You take it apart, reduce it to a number of small, simple pieces, easy to understand, analyze them, put them all back together again, and then you understand the whole.
Isn't that what's known as scientific thinking, Miss Hoffman? Really? What you call the mechanistic view, isn't that what the scientific method's all about?
Is it?
Well, I don't think so, but I'd like to kind of hear from the physicist, Jack.
All right, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Well, you're right in a way, Mr.
Jack. Call me Jack.
Okay, Jack. You are right in a sense. But it wasn't always so. Not before Descartes. When he introduced such thinking, it amounted to a revolutionary break with the church. He said, I don't need the Pope to tell me how the world functions. I can find that out for myself. Because to me, the world is just a machine. And then he became fascinated with clockworks and made the clock into a central metaphor. He said, I consider the human body as nothing but a machine. A healthy man is like a well-made clock. A sick man is like an ill-made clock.
Well, the metaphor seems a little clumsy now, but it worked, didn't it?
Yes, so successfully that scientists came to believe that all living things, plants, animals, us, are nothing but machines. And that's the fallacy. It carried over into everything, arts, politics.
I don't know. It seems to me that most people don't even remember who Descartes was. I'm sorry. I guess I just don't follow you.
But he'd like to. If you could just break it down into 30-second media bites, that's more what he's used to.
Very funny. All right, what is it that I don't recognize? What's so bad about Descartes?
But there's nothing bad about Descartes. In fact, I think Descartes is wonderful. He was a godsend in the 17th century. But times have changed since then. We need a new way of understanding life. That pendulum, for example, has long since been replaced by a tiny quartz crystal. And these magnificent hand-forged wheels turned into a microchip the size of my thumbnail. That's how far modern science has left mechanistic thinking behind. But you politicians, you seem to have that clockwork still ticking in your head.
Keep on going, Sonia. Don't stop. Who knows? You may just have that vital piece of information that we Pauls, venal and stupid as we are, have been missing out on all along.
Well, there you go, thinking in terms of pieces.
Pieces are all we get of the picture, only fragments. Come on, give me some examples.
Well, let's take the population problem, for example. You can't solve it by looking at different forms of birth control in isolation. Research has proven again and again that the most effective form of birth control is not a pill. It's economic and social gains which will reduce the desire for large families.
That's true.
Do you know that in our world, every day 40,000 children die from malnutrition and preventable diseases? That's every other second. It's now, and now. But the short lives of these children cannot be seen in isolation. They're part of a whole system involving the economics, involving the environment, and more specifically, involving high levels of third world debt.
How's that?
The burden of frenzied borrowing is not falling on those with foreign bank accounts, nor on those who created the imbalance. The burden is falling on the already deprived. 3 years ago, President Nyerere asked the question, must we starve our children to pay our debts? That question has been answered in practice. And the answer has been yes, because since he asked, hundreds and thousands of little children in the third world have given their lives to pay their country's debts. And millions more are still paying interest with their malnourished minds and bodies. Take Brazil. Do you know that they are destroying the Amazon rainforest at the rate of 1 football field a second? No. Why? They're trying to pay their national debts with cattle and land speculation. They don't even have time to sell the timber, so they're setting fire to the woods. And our barren forests are one of the main causes of the global warming, the greenhouse effect. And in the meantime, we are pouring our money into the arms race. See, you cannot look at one single of our global problems in isolation, trying to understand it and solve it. Of course, you can fix a fragment of a piece, but it will deteriorate a second later because what it was connected to has been ignored. We have to change everything together at the same time. The ideals, the institutions, the values.
All of this sounds kind of familiar. Do you two know each other? Is this a setup? Well, all right. What do I think of this? Yes, the problems are complex, but you're just looking at the dark side because so's our capacity to respond, isn't it? Communications, data banks, technology. We already have the tools to deal with a lot of these problems, even if they are more complex.
Candide himself, the eternal optimist.
But don't you see that all these new technologies, they're causing more problems than they solve? In medicine, for example, there's been an overwhelming increase in technology, but the costs have spiraled concurrently. It's become medicine for the rich. And public health hasn't improved significantly, although public health would improve dramatically if we just changed our eating habits, for example. But instead, the experts are occupied with making artificial hearts. But if our agribusiness had fed us better instead of chopping down the rainforests in order to make cattle ranches, in order to produce more and more red meat, which is one of the direct causes of heart attacks, then maybe we wouldn't have to spend so much of our money on artificial hearts, and so on and so on. Well, this is all examples of interconnectedness.
But Sonia... All right, supposing that you're right and everything is connected to everything else, as you say. Still, you've got to start somewhere, don't you? So that's the real political question here. Where do you start?
By changing the way we're seeing the world. You see, you're still searching for the right piece to fix first. You don't see that all the problems simply are fragments of one single crisis, a crisis of perception.
Oh, good. The world is coming to an end, and you say it's a crisis of perception. I'm sorry, that's a little abstract for me. And all of this stuff about modern medicine, all your criticisms. I mean, I may be a doctor's son, but you have to admit that this mechanistic medicine has been pretty successful.
Well, up to a point. But simply by blocking the mechanisms of a disease doesn't mean healing it. I mean, it's like in politics. It's just shifting the problem to another sphere.
Are you going to help me in this, or are you going to leave me stranded out here in this argument by myself?
I'm going to leave you stranded. I'm going to leave you stranded.
Okay. A person goes to a doctor today with recurring attacks of gallstones, and the doctor takes the gallbladder out, and lo and behold, the pain goes away. Now, you could say that the doctor is working from a poor perceptual model, that he just concentrated on a part of the clock that wasn't working and removed it. But the fact is, the patient is out of his pain, he's feeling better, and the clock is ticking again. His perceptual model worked.
But is everything that works good for the system?
Oh, come on, Sonia, that's disingenuous and not at all useful when applied to politics, which is, after all, a system that is based on people. It's the art of bringing people to agree on a certain course of action. If that course of action succeeds, the people are satisfied. If not, they're not. It's as simple as that. If it works, it's good. Period.
But isn't that exactly what you said, why politics doesn't work anymore? That politics, you said, needed to become the art of the impossible?
Whose side are you on?
Hers, obviously. She's intelligent, gracious, and she's more attractive.
Listen, Jack, I'd like to get back to the systems. You know, you called me dishonest.
No.
Yeah, let's talk about the gallbladder again. Let's say the gallbladder is out and the pain is gone. But what about the stress that might have brought the illness on? If that stress persists, he's probably going to get sick again. Or let's say he had changed his nutrition much earlier and done some exercise. He may never have developed the gallstones in the first place. See, a little health education might have been much cheaper than the operation. A lot less painful, too. But our system doesn't encourage prevention. It encourages intervention.
Okay, you're not disingenuous, but to blame all this on a French philosopher who's been dead for 300 years, isn't that a little out of proportion? Maybe even a little eccentric?
No. Not if I'm right. See, my point isn't to condemn Descartes' thinking. It's simply to recognize its limitations. Might have been extremely useful to perceive the world as a machine for 300 years, but that perception today is not only inaccurate, it's actually harmful. We need a new vision of the world.
What's that quotation? It's foolish for a society to try to cling to its old ideas in new times, just as it's foolish for a grown man to try to squeeze into the coat that fit him in his youth. Something like that. Thomas Jefferson. Maybe you're not crazy.